white pieces.
How does it keep happening, Tanya? I don't get it. It's the white pieces victorious again. There was a lot going on in that game. Let's not forget, Denis went in to that voluntarily. He said, let me sacrifice, get the pawns, give the pieces. And in the end, Arjun made him pay.
I'm almost starting to believe, Aman, that the player who wins with black first is going to win this match. Almost feels like it's written in the stars.
Right. Yeah. At this point, it definitely feels that way. Really interesting position that we have here, because right out of the opening, we see a pawn just offered by Denis. And this is absolutely by design. In terms of compensation, I have seen this before. I think white is doing tremendously because you just are all over the dark squares. You get really quick development, probably even both rooks arriving to the center before black even manages to castle.
And our feature chat pointing out the pattern that we've been talking about. I'll point out another pattern with these two players, the H-pawn moving forwards. I've lost count of the number of games that has happened within the first 12 moves on the board. We have that again, but in this, more familiar because you need to stop white from going H5, hitting that bishop in G6.
Exactly. Yeah, this one I can actually understand. A lot of them have been very mysterious, as we'll maybe see, ideas like queen d4, even just a modest queen d2. White can castle, but you don't want to drop that h-pawn. I didn't think that this was the best idea, Tanya. I liked keeping the bishops, but full commit by Denis to doubling these pawns. I don't know about this.
It's such a tough choice to make. You give up your h4 pawn as well, but now Denis goes on the initiative. He's going to go on the king hunt, making sure that Arjun loses all right to castle. I have to say, it looks very powerful. You're hitting the rook, you're hitting the pawn on e6, only square to defend both.
Mm-hmm.
This
Yeah, I
looks
wonder if we'll
amazing for
see
white,
this
Aman.
knight f6 idea. I mean, you bring the knight to g4, but if you drop the e-pawn, then h2 is always protected. So white will be sure never to capture that knight on g4, never to open the h-file. So, I mean, honestly, somehow we've gone from an incredibly weird opening where I thought that white had the advantage all the way to, just about equal.
You say just about equal. I mean, this looks absolutely nuts to me, Aman. It looks insane, this position. Queen e5, and you won't take on g4. Will he just go for a queen trade, potentially? Queen g3, trying to get the queens off the board. You're not up a pawn. It's level material. I'm not sure how good that will be. Well, he fights on. He keeps the queens on the board. I hear you're equal. I see the eval bar agrees with you, but I think from a human perspective, it's a game for all three results, this one.
Yeah, well, equal meaning equal chances. Certainly not a draw. So at this point, I would take white. I would take black. The position is impossible to even see an advantage for either side. Look how scary this looks for black, but at the same time, white has checkmating ideas with knight g5 as well.
And I think that's exactly why Arjun forced the queen trade. He didn't want to allow those knight jumps, spinning and mating on f7 there. Now material balance, and I think now it feels like once Arjun's able to get that h8 rook into the game. But is it that easy? Because once that happens, you can imagine this fizzling out. But Arjun's still behind in development in this one.
Yeah, I wonder if is it fair to say that at this stage in the game, is this like one of the better positions we've seen for the black pieces this match?
I am inclined to agree with you. I mean, usually it's, even if it's some sort of a dynamic equality, it's usually white who's on the push, on the attack there. But so far, things do look under control. I like this idea of trying to bring the knight to c5. If white goes b4, black has the option to go rook c8, putting pressure on that c4 pawn.
Right, and right as I said, equality, I felt that black's king e7 move, maybe instead of king g7, was a little bit risky, but maybe white missing the opportunity to do a little bit better in that previous position. Pawn to f4, can you really blame Denis for going for this move? It looks like you're winning a pawn here or encouraging the king to take a step up the board, but king d8 taking a step back, immediately I'm thinking about pawn to c5, pawn to f5 played.
Oh, and that's getting dangerous right now. You take that pawn, the bishop jumps there, the knight on d7. It's under the line of fire with the rook beautifully placed on d1. Bishop takes pawn, almost looks like game over. Arjun just voluntarily walked into this, right? King f8, king e7, king d8, and gotten
Yeah.
himself into this really strange pin in the endgame. Knight
Yeah, I
e4?
just didn't see the need for it. Knight e4 is a fantastic move. I mean, we just want to add to the pressure here. And you can see king c7 is the move. How do we keep adding the pressure?
Well, the blue arrow shows up and Denis Lazavik shows up. Knight d6 hitting the bishop, knight b5, a big idea on the board. Always taking on d7, the e5 pawn hanging in certain positions as well. And meanwhile, Arjun's rook on h8 hasn't made a single move in the game.
Yeah, that's right. It's been dying to get into the action, and we're seeing it yet again. This has been consistent. Time pressure for Arjun, right? How is he going to survive in this match being always the one first down on time?
And he cashes in. You know, he played it to perfection, built the pressure. Now he's up a pawn, takes that bishop, takes the pawn. Bishop takes knight. I have to say again, you know, you want to keep that bishop on the board. So rook d5, understandable. But is the black knight too active now, Aman?
I think yes. I don't know why we allowed that. Denis could have taken that knight, played the rook end game up a pawn. Not that easy, but certainly better. Instead, we're in a position where I think the activity is going to compensate fully.
A b2 attack, you can't push the pawn because a3 will fall instead. So I'm expecting more trades with rook takes pawn and knight takes pawn. Meanwhile, Arjun also wanting to finally get that rook from h8 to e8, hitting that bishop on e4, picks up a3, knight falls back, rook to follow up next into the game.
Yeah, there's b4, full liquidation here. This is looking more and more drawish. Even if you win this h-pawn, it's not going to be enough to win the game.
I think, while I agree with everything you said, I think the game still goes on. I think they're going to play for a while, this one.
Yep. Yeah, let's see. It's definitely the case that you have to make sure you're winning this in the right way as white, because if the knight can sack for the pawn, that's it. This is just a draw, and I don't think this pawn can get going in time, but let's see.
And notice how the white bishop's beautifully placed with that two square theory against the knight, just controlling all the squares for the knight to actually come back and give itself up. But it looks like he's found his way. The knight d4 will go back. Bishop d7, again, the two square distance from the knight, knight f3 would be draw on the spot.
Yeah, at this point, the thing is you have to guard f3, and so the black king is going to be able to situate itself in front of the pawn. Not 100% a draw, only because you've taken control of this square, but it feels like we're very close.
And he's achieved that setup, right? Where the knight on e7 stops g6. He's going to shuffle the king around meanwhile and stops it. But as long as your knight remains there, you know the pawn isn't moving forward.
Yeah, I have to
But 2
say,
seconds, you know, still anything can happen.
exactly right. He's made significant progress, much more than I would have expected. And look at this, 1 second, knight f5. He finds the best move in the position, but he's constantly being put under pressure.
He is, and that's when those losing blunders happens, right? Down to those last few seconds. But now he's found this idea of stopping the pawn on g7 instead of g6.
Yeah,
And Dennis trying to score that zugzwang.
This does not feel right. As in, it feels like black now has maybe the easier draw to make. But I have to say, Denis was very impressive with the threats he was able to generate.
And that's because the knight from g7 has so many squares to jump to control that square, that it's very hard to get that zugzwang. I think we're going to see the repetition very soon.
Yeah, there's just no way to do it. The knight stays